A simple woman just stepped into the world's most exclusive shooting range. With a rifle older than most of the members, they laughed, mocked, and live-streamed her humiliation. But exactly 7 minutes later, she set a record that made billionaires bow in silence. This isn't just a story of aim, it's a story of legacy, of justice, of one woman who rewrote the rules of elitism with 10 perfect shots. Stay with me because what happens next will leave you speechless. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where in the world are you watching from, and if this story moves you, don't forget to subscribe for more. It was just an ordinary Thursday morning when Harper Lane walked up to the gates of Hawthorne Elite Range. But what happened next would fracture an entire hierarchy. The California sun burned clean across the steel and glass facade of the Hawthorne complex, its surfaces polished to perfection like the barrels inside. It was a place designed not just for performance but for spectacle, a gleaming cathedral for the rich and well-blooded, to show off both heritage and hardware. Everything here screamed power. The floors in black marble, the glass walls soundproofed from judgment, the LED leaderboards pulsing with names that made stock tickers tremble. This wasn't a shooting range. This was a kingdom, and Harper, from the moment she stepped into view, was branded and intruding. Her jacket was faded olive, threadbare in places, like it had seen one too many winters. Her jeans bore the kind of wear that didn't come from designer. Distressing, but from actual work. And then there was the rifle, an M1. Garand, old wooden, almost sacred in its age. It looked less like a weapon and more like an artifact that belonged behind museum glass, and yet it rested across her shoulder with quiet reverence, the way one might carry a family's memory. She didn't say a word when she reached the reception line, but eyes turned anyway. Not because she was loud, but because she wasn't in a place filled with tailored tactical gear, glinting scopes, and sleek carbon frames becooked like a forgotten chapter, or worse, a mistake. VIP lanes don't allow the lost and confused, sneered Derek, the gatekeeper, whose jawline looked chiseled by entitlement. He didn't glance at her face. He didn't need to. His eyes scanned her clothes like scanning a barcode of worthlessness behind him. The wolves began to circle. They letting in mops and maintenance now, Connor Blake's voice echoed like a slap. A spoiled grin spread beneath hair. Too perfect to be real, son of a hedge fund tycoon. His tracksuit cost more than Harper's monthly rent, and he knew it. Harper said nothing. Instead, she reached into her pocket and retrieved a worn, weathered card. The kind of VIP pass you didn't buy with money, but earned with something heavier, blood and allegiance. Her father's name was etched faintly beneath the magnetic strip. Colonel Thomas Lane, sniper legend. The pass was a relic, but the scanner blinked green with a soft beep of affirmation. The laughter faltered. Derek stepped aside, murmuring, "This is a mistake," under his breath. But she was already walking past judgment, past legacy, past every eye that dared to measure her with contempt the moment her boots hit the marble. The digital gallows were raised. Phones came out, cameras flicked on, live streams began broadcasting. Her humiliation in real time with captions dripping cruelty. Welfare shooter, she bring her rifle from the Civil War. Someone tagged a congressman's son. Someone else zoomed in on her boots, and somewhere across the country in a hospital room with white curtains and too many machines, her mother watched, face-pale, breath catching on every comment. The range was a temple of silence and thunder. 50-meter lanes stretched like veins under high ceilings, each one glowing with ambient light. The air reeked of gunpowder, ambition, and burnt espresso. The elite lounged in leather chairs, their rifles custom engraved, their coffee orders precise to the decimal. She was a crack in the mirror. "Even cleaning staff gets access now, huh?" came a voice soaked in sarcasm. Tyler Reed, heir to a biotech empire who hadn't failed at anything since birth. His friends laughed like an echo chamber of privilege. Harper's silence wrapped around her like armor. Then came Professor Laura Vance, head instructor, who wore her diamond earrings like punctuation. "This is highly irregular," she said loud enough for the room to hear. "Hawthorne is for trained professionals, not charity cases with antique toys." Her smile was pity dipped in poison. Another chuckle, another camera angle, another notch in the noose. "Leave now and we'll forget this embarrassment," Vance said, gesturing toward the exit like she was excusing a janitor from a gala. Harper adjusted the strap on her rifle, her braids shifted slightly. the sunlight catching a glint of copper in her hair. Her hazel eyes didn't flicker, didn't flinch. Her mother, watching from that hospital bed, could barely breathe. The cameras fed on her restraint like vultures. Then came Ethan Caldwell. He was Hawthorne's golden boy, the prince of precision. 25, handsome in that dangerous way with custom tactical gear tailored like a tuxedo. His rifle cost more than most people's cars. He had the numbers to back it. Now, 10-9-8, the board glowed with his dominance. He stepped forward and smirking, "If you beat me, I'll leave immediately." He let the word hang like smoke. "But if I win, you're gone for good, janitor," gasps laughter. Someone whistled. Harper didn't nod, didn't blink, but something in her posture shifted, just barely. He leaned closer. "No pressure, sweetheart." She stepped forward into the crosshairs of legacy and humiliation, and the world watched. The commentary boiled online. Some said she was a joke. Others said she was insane, but a growing current, quiet but rising, watched her with something more dangerous than doubt, hope. "She's not saying a word," someone commented, "because she's about to say everything." Another replied behind her. Derek muttered again, "This is a mistake." But no one heard him now. Harper walked to lane 8. Her rifle, heavy with history, came off her shoulder like a reverent ritual. She stood before the target 50 meters away. A red dot glowed at the center. 100 silent heartbeats waited. She hadn't fired a single shot yet, but already she had changed the air. Harper Lane didn't grow up in places where names were engraved on brass plaques or stitched into monogrammed jackets. She grew up in silence, in the whispering pines of rural Georgia, in the backwoods ranges, where dew still clung to leaves at dawn, and in the slow, steady voice of her father as he taught her how to breathe through the trigger pull. Colonel Thomas Lane had never been a man of many words. His reputation did most of the talking. 37 confirmed missions, a record no one dared touch, and a gaze that could stop an argument before it started. But to Harper, he wasn't the legend people saluted in silence. He was the man who carved her sandwiches into triangles, who called her Little Echo, and who treated every sunrise like a ceremony. He taught her to shoot, not because he wanted a soldier for a daughter. He taught her because that's how he connected with land, with legacy, with stillness. A gun, he once said, kneeling beside her in the tall grass, is just a voice you must earn the right to speak with. She was 6 the first time she pulled a trigger. She missed the can. Her hands trembled. The rifle, even the .22, felt like holding thunder. But her father hadn't frowned. He had simply nodded and whispered. Again, years passed, can by can, tree stump by tree stump, she learned. Not just to aim, but to read wind, by watching leaves to measure distance, by sound to anticipate breath, the way a dancer anticipates the beat. He never pushed her, never raised his voice. But every time she thought of quitting, he simply stood beside her and waited like a mountain that wouldn't move. Then came the news. She was 16 when the flag arrived in a box, folded triangles, a sealed envelope. No body to bury. Killed in the line of duty, the letter had read, but it might as well have said, gone. There had been no war that day, just an extraction, just a bullet from somewhere no one saw, just silence after the funeral that wasn't. She stopped going to the range. The rifle went into the attic. Her braid got shorter, her silences got longer. She worked at a diner, wiping counters while people talked about lives that never brushed against hers. Her mother worked double shifts at a warehouse. Life became a series of quiet transactions. Until one night, nearly 7 years after the letter, a man walked into the diner. His shoulders were too square to be civilian, his hands too still. He didn't order food, just coffee. Black, no sugar. When she brought the cup to the table, he looked at her for the first time. Not the way customers usually did, searching for a name tag or trying to flirt through familiarity. He looked at her like he'd seen something long ago, and finally remembered Colonel Lane's girl. He asked, voice low and rough. She paused. The name was a ghost now, yes, she replied. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, weathered envelope. No address, just a seal, a military insignia she hadn't seen in years. I was with him, the man said. His last mission. He asked me to give you this if anything ever happened. Harper stared at the letter for a long time after the man left. The coffee cup sat untouched. She didn't open it until midnight. Inside was a single piece of paper. Handwritten, neat echo. If you're reading this, I guess I'm not there to say goodbye. Don't let them put me in a frame. I don't want you staring at medals. I want you to remember what we stood for. I know you stopped shooting. I understand, but listen to me carefully. There will come a time when they won't see you coming. They'll look at your boots and your jacket and decide who you are. Let them, then show them. You don't need my voice anymore. You have your own. When you are ready, go to Hawthorne. Your pass is under the floorboard. Be the bullet that sings, Dad. She didn't cry. Not then. Instead, she stood, walked barefoot to the attic, and pulled down the old case. The Garand still smelled of oil and time. The wood was smooth, darkened where her father's hands had rested it so many times beneath the floorboard in her bedroom as she found it. The pass, a military-coded clearance card issued by his commanding officer, an honorary VIP lifetime membership to the Hawthorne Elite Range. She held it like a fossil. She began training again. Not loudly, not publicly. Every morning before the warehouse shift started, before her mother even stirred backwoods old range sites where moss clung to broken targets, she rebuilt her form from memory, corrected her posture, recalibrated her breath, reacquainted herself with recoil. It was like learning a language you once knew in a dream. Neighbors talked, they always do. Why's that girl up at 5 a.m.? She's always got that old rifle. She trying to be her dad or something? She didn't answer. Didn't need to. She tracked her own stats, kept her own logs. She didn't join online forums, didn't share her progress on social media. She didn't need followers. She needed clarity. And soon her grouping was tighter than she'd ever achieved before. Her breath was more still. Her body became a metronome of patience. Then the letter came. It was from Hawthorne, an invitation, well, not quite that polite, a scheduling notice. Apparently, her father's CO had reactivated all legacy passes for a commemorative veterans tournament. Harper Lane was expected to appear. She almost threw the envelope away, but then she looked at her hands, calloused from work, but still steady, and she thought of her mother fighting late-stage illness with a dignity Harper couldn't match. Of her father, whose voice still echoed in the spaces between heartbeat and breath. She packed the rifle, the old jacket, no logos, no embroidery, just fabric with history in its threads. And then she took the Greyhound west. 28 hours later, she stood in front of glass and chrome, and 100 gazes sharpened into one question. Why is she here? But she didn't come to answer their question. She came to answer his. She hadn't crossed the country for revenge. She hadn't trained to prove anyone wrong. She had done it because of a promise written on paper and buried in blood. Because there would come a moment when they wouldn't see her coming. Let them laugh. She didn't need their approval. She needed only 10 perfect shots. The first thing Harper noticed when she crossed the threshold into the inner lounge of Hawthorne Elite Range was the sound, not the crack of gunfire or the whir of digital scoreboards, but the silence, not the kind that comes from peace, but the sort that grows in places soaked in judgment. It was the silence of polished boots, stepping across marble of glances exchanged like currency of whispered dismissals, just loud enough to land a bruise without drawing blood. The lounge felt more like a private club than a training ground. High ceilings framed with brushed steel beams, spotlit glass cases holding gold-plated rifles and Olympic medals, velvet ropes separating the VIP lounges from the ordinary lanes. And Harper, in her thrift store jacket and time-worn jeans, might as well have stepped out of another century. People stopped what they were doing, not because of awe, but because of offense. She could feel the burn of eyes across her skin, like lasers slicing through the dust on her jacket. A group of young athletes in matching designer track gear snickered over their protein shakes, fingers already tapping away on phones to update their feeds. The air smelled like money espresso synthetic leather, and something sterile and cold beneath it all. Wealth had a scent, and this place reeked of it. She moved quietly, ignoring the stares, the whispers, the way conversation shifted just as she passed, as if her presence diluted the flavor of their lattes. Her old rifle was slung across her shoulder, the wooden stock worn smooth from years of use. Some looked at it the way you might look at a family heirloom. Someone was dumb enough to bring into a pawn shop. A boy, barely 20, turned to his friend and said, just loud enough, "Is that wood? Like actual wood?" His friend laughed. "I've seen better rifles in Call of Duty." Harper kept walking. The screen behind the reception desk was now displaying the upcoming lineup for the day's Legacy Challenge, a closed event technically, but being streamed to thousands across the elite shooting community. And someone, probably the same kind of someone who always had admin access, had already posted a profile image of her from the moment she scanned her pass. The caption read, "Harper Lane, cosplay contestant." A chorus of emojis flooded the stream, laughing faces, broomsticks, janitor icons. She approached the equipment check-in area, a junior staffer with too much gel in his hair, and not enough patience, looked up from his tablet. His lips curled slightly, and he didn't even try to hide it. "We usually don't allow antiques," he muttered, tapping at the screen without looking at her. Range lanes can guarantee calibration for gear older than the staff. Harper opened her case and carefully laid her rifle across the counter. "It doesn't need your calibration." The boy paused, blinked, looked at her for the first time, then down at the rifle again. The name etched into the barrel, nearly worn smooth. T. Lane. His expression shifted for half a second, recognition flickering like static on a broken TV. Then it vanished, replaced by apathy and a click of his pen. "Lane 8, he said, sliding a token across to her. "Don't hit the walls. We just had them cleaned." She took the token without a word. It was then, as she crossed into the prep zone, that the whispers turned into performance. Vanessa Cole, tall blonde, dressed in tactical chic like she was on the cover of a fashion-forward combat magazine, stood with one hand on her custom sniper rifle, the other curled around a coffee cup labeled with her name in gold marker. She watched Harper approach like a queen watching a peasant track mud across her ballroom. "Oh my God," she said loud enough for her mic to catch. "Is that camo from a thrift store?" "This isn't the Hunger Games, sweetheart." Laughter phones lifted. Live stream captions surged, hash scrapyard, shooter and hash wagui, cosplay, someone, call, Goodwill. Harper didn't flinch. Her rifle's weight was steady in her hand, the way her father had taught her. Hold it like it belongs to you, not like it owns you. Vanessa stepped closer, just slightly, still smiling but with teeth. "I mean, I love vintage. Don't get me wrong. But maybe next time, leave the museum piece at home." Ethan Caldwell stood not far off, observing. His usual smirk twitched with interest as he watched the scene unfold. Harper locked eyes with Vanessa for the first time. There was no venom, no challenge, just a stillness that unsettled even the most secure. She wasn't fighting, she was waiting. Then came the final push. Colonel Raymond Pierce, the range's head coach, stepped out from behind the lane division. His voice carried across the floor. "Are we letting tourists into the pro lanes now?" Laughter again, but it was thinner this time, lane 8. Harper repeated, holding out her token. The colonel walked over slowly, the way lions do when they're not quite hungry but still intrigued. He took the token, examined it, looked her over. "Your paperwork checks out, doesn't make you qualify." "Make." She didn't respond. He leaned in closer. "If you don't want to embarrass yourself, now's the time to walk away." Harper blinked once slowly. "You can't embarrass someone who already knows who she is." The colonel said nothing, just stepped aside. As Harper took her place at lane 8, the crowd shifted. Not in admiration, but anticipation, like standing at the edge of a cliff, waiting to see someone fall. Vanessa sauntered back to her group, voice sharp enough to slice atmosphere. "I give her 3 shots before she jams that relic." Connor Blake leaned against the divider, sipping from a metallic sports bottle that probably cost more than Harper's rifle. "Bet she doesn't even hit the paper." A teenager next to him, streaming live, commented, "Guys, I'm telling you, she's gonna flinch so hard on the first shot, the bullet'll U-turn." Harper laid the rifle on the bench, removed her jacket with a calm practice motion. Beneath it, her shoulders were corded with lean muscle, the kind you earn from years of repetition, not from gym selfies. She began her prep routine, not flashy, not theatrical, just precise, each movement smooth. Her breathing slowed, her world narrowed, but the others didn't notice the way her hands never shook, or how her eyes never darted nervously. They only saw what they wanted, a girl in second-hand gear with a gun that smelled of history. What they didn't see, what they couldn't see, was that every moment of ridicule, every sarcastic chuckle, every sideways glance was already being measured, absorbed and burned into something far sharper than steel fuel, and the barrel was already warming. The air at lane 8 felt different, not because it was colder or thicker, but because Harper Lane made it that way. She hadn't even loaded her rifle, and yet the space around her felt weighted, dense with tension, soaked in anticipation. Across the range, conversations had stilled into murmurs. Even the most jaded members of Hawthorne Elite leaned slightly forward in their plush leather chairs, their handcrafted rifles momentarily forgotten. Some stared through the glass partition as if watching an anomaly unfold. Others simply waited, certain they were about to witness a controlled demolition of someone foolish enough to think courage could replace status. But Harper wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't here for approval. She was here because her father had told her to be. One lane over. Ethan Caldwell was going through his own setup, ritual, polished, rehearsed like the son of the gods he thought himself to be. His gloves matched his rifle grip. His stance was a ballet of masculine perfection. Everything about him screamed dominance, even the way he adjusted his sights with casual flair. He knew the cameras were on him. He liked it that way. 10 shots, Lane, he called, over voice smooth and laced with amusement. Let's see if you can finish without crying. More laughter, the rich kind, the kind with family offices and yacht memberships. Harper didn't respond. She was crouched beside her rifle, fingers moving with slow precision. She checked the chamber, adjusted the stock, aligned her breath. The M1 Garand wasn't a modern weapon. It wasn't meant to be. It was a message. And it was about to speak louder than any smart rifle on that floor. Coach Pierce moved to the observation post beside the lane's clipboard in hand. He tapped the mic and cleared his throat. Participants, you will fire 10 shots. Each shot will be scored digitally. Best score out of 10 determines the winner. Any tie will be resolved by a group tightness tiebreaker. You will not speak during the match. You will not interact with your opponent, and you will not embarrass this institution. His eyes settled on Harper with the weight of disdain. Are we clear? Harper nodded once. Ethan gave a mock salute. The crowd leaned in. Harper took her stance, her feet locked into position, not wide, not narrow. Her shoulder pressed back into the stock cheek, resting against the wood like it was familiar skin. Her heart wasn't racing. Her mind wasn't screaming. It was quiet. The kind of quiet her father had once called combat. Still shooter ready. The intercom buzzed. And then came Ethan's first shot. Cracked clean tight, echoing down the range like a snap of thunder. The screen lit up. 9 applause, muted but present. He turned slightly, just enough for the cameras to catch the angle of his jaw. Shot 2, 10. Shot 3, 9, 8. By the 5th shot, he was averaging 9.94, an elite score even by Hawthorne standards. The scoreboard flashed with his name in bright gold, glowing like prophecy. Connor Blake whistled. She's toast. Vanessa Cole leaned over the divider, her optics glinting. Might as well rename lane 8. The donation lane, the 6th shot, and Euro again. Ethan turned slightly toward Harper. Not enough to break protocol, but enough to let her see the gleam in his eyes. The confidence, the inevitability of final shot, Pierce announced. Ethan's rifle barked one last time. The screen read 10. Duro, his total none. A near-perfect score. The crowd began clapping softly. Someone shouted, "Don't bother cleaning lane." She won't make a dent. Then it was Harper's turn. She stepped forward, calm as winter glass. The Garand in her grip was heavy, not just in weight but in meaning. This wasn't a show. This wasn't for likes or live streams. This was her vow, cast in lead. She breathed once slow, then pulled the trigger. Crack. The sound was different, less mechanical, more organic, as if the rifle itself remembered what it was born to do. The scoreboard flashed 10-0. A few people clapped sarcastic. Beginner's luck, someone muttered. Second shot, 10-0, the murmurs dimmed. Third shot, 10-0. Now the air started to shift. The sarcasm thinned, replaced by discomfort. Vanessa lowered her optics. Tyler leaned in. Even Ethan's smirk had begun to fade, replaced by something tighter. Harper didn't celebrate, didn't blink. Fourth shot, 10-0. The system triggered a soft chime, the auto alert for a shooter hitting perfect scores repeatedly. It rarely sounded. Today it sang 5th shot, 10-0. Now it was quiet, not respectful. Quiet, not reverent. Shocked. People's fingers stopped typing. Cameras steadied. A 6th shot. Side, 10. A gasp somewhere in the back. Vanessa stood frozen, lips parted. Connor's hand trembled, knocking over his drink. 7th shot. 0. The chime now sounded with every trigger, a melody that felt more like a verdict. 8th shot. 10-0. Tyler Reed had gone pale. Coach Pierce's clipboard slipped, hitting the floor with a clatter. 9th shot. 10. Ethan stepped back from his lane. His throat moved like he was swallowing something heavy. Now the whole range stood. No one asked them to. No one dared sit. Final shot. Harper exhaled once, slow and precise. Then she fired. The screen paused for a moment, loading, calculating, scanning for error, then flashed the result. 10-0. Her total 100-0. The system processed the group spread, comparing every bullet. A new banner appeared in gold letters. New range record, Harper Lane. One and a hush, one whole grouping. Then came the silence. Not awkward, not tense. Reverend Ethan stared at the board at his reflection in the glass. Coach Pierce straightened slowly as if trying to decide if he was witnessing a miracle or a reckoning. Then without a word, he began to clap. It started slow. Then another joined, and another, until the walls echoed with applause. Harper stood still, the Garand at her side, her breath even, her expression unreadable. But in her chest, beneath the calm, her father's voice rang true. Be the bullet that sings, and she had sung louder than money, sharper than legacy. 10 perfect notes in the language of precision. The applause didn't hit Harper all at once. It came in waves, slow and reluctant, like a crowd unsure whether they had witnessed greatness or been fooled by it. But as the digital banner glowed above Lane 8, new range record, Harper Lane, 100, one whole grouping. Something shifted in the room. The silence wasn't stunned anymore. It was reverent. It was the quiet that came after a storm when the air is too full of what just happened to allow for speech. Ethan Caldwell was the first to break. He stood several yards from Harper, still holding his rifle like it had betrayed him. His jaw flexed and his lips parted, but the words tangled before they could leave. He looked at the scoreboard again, as if expecting it to change, to glitch, to reset, but it didn't. He had lost, and not just lost, been eclipsed. People were watching him now. The boy king of Hawthorne, the golden child of the elite, standing frozen in the shadow of someone he had dismissed without a second thought. His pride screamed for a rebuttal, a retake, a rematch. But his instincts, honed more by wealth than wisdom, told him not to move. Harper was still in position, lowering her rifle with the same care she had lifted it. She didn't raise her arms in victory, didn't turn to face the cameras, didn't demand recognition. Her calm was louder than any celebration, and that made it worse. Coach Pierce stepped forward. His boots echoed in the sudden stillness. For a long moment, he just stood beside Harper, looking at her profile like he was seeing a portrait for the first time and realizing it wasn't a painting. It was a mirror. In 40 years, he said, his voice low but carrying. I've never seen that. His gaze swept across the room. And I don't mean just the score. He turned to Harper, his voice almost reverent. What's your name again? Harper Lane, she said softly. Pierce gave a slow nod. Colonel Thomas Lane's daughter, she nodded once. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Even those who didn't recognize the name immediately could tell from the way Pierce's shoulders straightened that it meant something. Your father trained legends, Pierce said. Looks like he raised one. Harper said nothing. Her fingers brushed the sling of the Garand as she stepped away from the lane. Somewhere in the back, someone dropped a cup. No one noticed General Marcus Tate. The range director appeared near the VIP entrance, silver-haired and severe. He rarely stepped onto the range floor. His presence was reserved for sponsors, board members, and dignitaries. But today he walked straight toward Harper, his shoes making no sound against the polished floor. He paused 2 feet away from her and studied her face as if searching for weakness, for an explanation for something. Miss Lane, he said, his voice crisp. That was not just exceptional marksmanship. That was a statement. He turned slowly, addressing the room, the cameras, the live stream. Hawthorne was built on precision, he said, on discipline, on merit. And today that merit has been redefined by someone none of us expected. He gestured toward the scoreboard. From this day forward, the name Harper Lane will stand as the new standard for what it means to shoot at Hawthorne gasps. A wave of stunned expressions passed through the crowd like wind through tall grass. Tate wasn't finished. There will be consequences for today's conduct, he added. For the mockery, the elitism, the disrespect. He turned toward the admin staff. Derek from reception, Professor Vance Lane assignments committee, all under review. Effective immediately. The named parties froze. Derek's face turned ashen. Professor Vance, who had earlier dismissed Harper as a charity case, stood rigid, her eyes wide as if she'd just heard her own sentence pronounced. Then the scoreboard updated again. A new section appeared beneath Harper's name. Status record holder, range full access membership, lifetime. And just like that, the rules changed. Vanessa Cole was the first to leave. No words, no farewell. She simply packed her rifle with jerky, angry movements and walked out, heels tapping a retreat that echoed with humiliation. Connor Blake looked like someone had hit mute on his arrogance. His eyes avoided every lens, every glance, every screen, replaying Harper's shots in high definition. He slunk back toward the locker room, the fabric of his expensive tracksuit whispering defeat. Tyler Reed didn't move. He sat in the lounge rifle, untouched, fingers laced tightly, eyes locked on the floor as if trying to disappear into it. But the live stream kept rolling. Comments flooded in. Harper Lane just rewrote the playbook. They laughed at her boots. Now they're standing in them. Legend icon, Queen How at Harper Lane 100 trended within minutes. Ethan finally stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. The crowd parted for him, but the silence didn't return. As respect, it hovered his judgment. He stopped in front of Harper, eyes searching hers. His voice, when it came, was quiet, raw. "I was wrong," he said. "About you, about everything." Harper tilted her head, watching him with no trace of anger. Only understanding. "You didn't just beat me," Ethan said. "You made me realize I've never actually competed before today." Harper didn't answer, but her eyes softened slightly. He exhaled, then added, "Can I buy you a coffee?" A chuckle rippled through the crowd, gentler this time, genuine. She offered a faint smile. Black, no sugar, the same way her father had taken it, the same way the man who'd brought her the letter years ago had ordered it. It wasn't just about winning, it was about returning full circle. Later, long after the cameras stopped rolling, after the VIPs had retreated to lick their wounds and rework their scripts, Harper stood alone at lane 8. She ran her fingers along the wooden stock of her rifle. It still smelled faintly of gun oil and old pine. She imagined her father standing beside her, arms crossed, proud, but saying nothing. Because he didn't need to. She had spoken with every shot, and the world had finally listened. The day after Harper Lane's record-breaking performance at Hawthorne Elite Range, the entire shooting world had changed, and it didn't even realize it yet. While the internet erupted with hashtags and slow-motion replays of her 10 perfect shots, Harper herself disappeared. No press conference, no interviews, no celebratory post on social media. She had no account to tag, no platform to post a triumphant selfie. While the elite scrambled to save face and rewrite their own narratives, Harper quietly walked out of the building, took the long route back to her hotel, and stared at the ceiling until dawn. She hadn't come to be a hero. She'd come to keep a promise. But promises once fulfilled don't vanish. They echo, they ripple outward. That morning, the front page of every competitive shooting forum was plastered with her name. "Who is Harper Lane?" asked one red thread with over 6,000 upvotes in less than an hour. Theories flourished: secret military program, Olympic reject, a stunt by the range itself to generate media buzz. Only a few people knew the truth. She was the daughter of a legend, raised not by privilege but by principles. At Hawthorne, fallout had already begun. Derek from reception had been suspended. Professor Vance had vanished into indefinite leave. General Marcus Tate issued a statement that sounded equal parts apology and manifesto. From this day forward, performance will speak louder than pedigree at Hawthorne. Yet even as policies were being rewritten and names removed from bronze plaques, there was a lingering unease, because Harper Lane hadn't just shattered a record, she'd shattered an illusion. The elite had long believed their world was untouchable, walled in by wealth and lineage. But Harper walked through that gate without permission, without a sponsor, and turned their fortress into glass. And for Ethan Caldwell, that realization didn't leave quietly. He sat in the lounge late into the evening after the match, staring at lane 8 as if expecting her to return. The rifle that once felt like an extension of his arm now felt unfamiliar, useless. His groupings meant nothing next to the surgical precision of her shot. Her rifle had no optics, no AI stabilization, no carbon barrel. It had grit, history, a pulse. She had made him realize that he had been winning games, not battles. And worst of all, she had done it without ever once trying to humiliate him. That night, for the first time in his life, Ethan stayed silent on social media. The next day, Harper didn't return to the range. Instead, she visited the Veterans Memorial Park 10 miles away, the place her father's name had been etched into stone long before she had ever been invited to Hawthorne. The plaque was simple, clean, no title. Just Thomas Lane never missed the truth. She stood before it with a quiet stillness, then placed a small black ribbon beside the name. She didn't cry. Not today. That same afternoon, Hawthorne Range staff reached out. They offered her a speaking slot at the upcoming annual gala. "You're a symbol now," they wrote in the email. "Your story has inspired thousands," she declined. Another message came later, this time from a military academy looking to offer her a coaching position, full-time benefits, prestige. She declined again. Harper didn't want to be anyone's symbol. She had watched people wear symbols like armor before turning them into shackles. Still, she couldn't stop what came next. A week after the match, a package arrived at her apartment, a simple white envelope with gold lettering, no sender inside an invitation to the National Precision Championship, normally invitation only for previous champions and Olympic-level competitors. She was neither, but her name had become a door key. She stared at the card for a long time. 2 days later, she showed up at the qualifier. There were no live streams this time, no commentators whispering dramatic monologues, just a room full of competitors, half of whom couldn't stop glancing her way. Some smiled, some glared, some nodded in silent respect, but none of them spoke to her directly. Harper didn't need them to. She walked to her lane, not lane 8 this time, but she didn't care. She unpacked her rifle, 10 shots, 10 pings, another perfect score, another group so tight the bullet holes could have been mistaken for one. When she stepped off the line, a woman in her mid-30s approached. Plainclothes, soft voice, her hands shook slightly. I just wanted to say, she said my daughter watched your video. She's never held a rifle in her life, but she asked me if we could go to the range together. Said she wants to try. Because of you. Harper's chest tightened slightly. She didn't know what to say, so she just nodded and said, tell her to breathe slow. The rest comes later. Moments like that started happening more often. At grocery stores, at gas stations, at old backwood ranges where people still remembered her father's name. Harper had never chased attention, but it found her like dust finds sunlight. Then one evening, Ethan Caldwell showed up at her doorstep. No camera crew, no reporters, just him. He looked awkward in a way she hadn't seen before. Hands shoved in his jacket pockets, eyes downcast. I thought you might slam the door, he said. Harper leaned on the doorframe. I'm thinking about it. He smiled faintly, fair. He took a breath. I've been training differently. Not with tech, just fundamentals. The way you shoot, I'm awful at it. Harper said nothing. I thought maybe. He looked up, meeting her eyes. You could show me how to earn it. The silence stretched between them like a chord not yet struck. Then Harper stepped aside. He walked in. Weeks passed. They trained together early mornings, long afternoons. She didn't go easy on him. He didn't ask her to. Slowly, awkwardly, trust formed between breath and recoil. He asked questions, but never too many. And she answered only when she had something worth saying. Their bond was not forged in flirtation or fireworks, but in shared silence. One morning while they sat on a hillside watching fog roll through pine trees, Ethan turned to her. I think I know why you never reacted. Why you never yelled back at them. She didn't respond. Because if you had, he said you would have given them power. Harper exhaled, because I already knew who I was. He nodded. I want that. She looked at him. Then keep showing up, and he did. So did others. Young girls, former rivals, retired vets. People who had been told they didn't belong. Harper never asked for students, but they kept coming. So she taught, not for recognition, not for fame, but because somewhere deep in the silence of a trigger, press she had found a way to keep her father alive. And maybe, just maybe, to help others find their own voice in the chamber of doubt. 3 months had passed since Harper Lane rewrote the rules of Hawthorne Elite Range, and the world had not stopped talking. What began as a viral anomaly had evolved into something else, something permanent. Her name, once mocked in hashtags, had become a symbol scrawled across the internet, like gospel, hashtag Harper100, the one. Whole legend, had precision queen. But none of that reached Harper in the way others expected. She didn't follow the hashtags, didn't engage with the praise, didn't upload a single photo of herself posing next to the updated digital plaque at the range. She simply kept showing up. Not just at Hawthorne, where her lifetime membership had gone from honorary to historical, but at smaller ranges across the country. Community ranges, rusted gates and dirt lanes, the kinds of places where shooters brought packed lunches and duct taped their gear together. The kind of places her father once called sacred in their simplicity. Harper arrived quietly, asked for a lane, and always offered to pay, even when the owners waved her off like a local legend returning home. But what she couldn't wave off was the shift happening around her. One day in North Carolina, an 11-year-old girl named Maya waited for 2 hours just for a glimpse of Harper, her small hands clutching a sketch of Harper's face drawn in colored pencil. Her face lit with the kind of fire that only comes from believing in something bigger than yourself. She asked only one thing. Can I shoot next to you? Harper adjusted her lane assignment. They didn't talk much, just nodded. But by the third shot, Harper noticed the girl mimicking her breath, her posture, her rhythm. The tightness of the groupings didn't matter. What mattered was the stillness in the girl's eyes, the same stillness Harper once saw in the mirror when she was 6 and trying to impress her father. Later that evening, Harper bought Maya her first ear protection set and wrote a single sentence inside the box. The world's loud, shoot steady, more stories followed. Veterans with tremors who found calm after watching her instructional videos. A retired sharpshooter who said he'd fallen back in love with the art of aim because she reminded him why it mattered. Even skeptics. Those who once ridiculed her were now quoting her breathing patterns and breaking down the mechanics of her legendary Lane 8 grouping in YouTube analysis videos. And yet Harper never let it change her pace, not even when a representative from a high-end sports agency contacted her with a brand partnership opportunity that included exclusive merchandise, custom boots, replica, rifles, a Harper collection of apparel. They offered 7 figures. She turned them down without hesitation. "It's not about selling what I wear," she said flatly during a rare phone interview with Range and Fire Quarterly. "It's about reminding people they don't need to wear anything special to be enough." Her refusal only amplified her legend, but change was creeping closer, even if she didn't want it. Ethan Caldwell, once the golden boy of Hawthorne, now shadowed her footsteps, not as a competitor, but as something else, something evolving. Every week he trained under her guidance, his scores steadily improved, but more importantly, his perspective had. The man who used to measure success in followers and digital trophies now tracked his growth by how still he could keep his breath under pressure. And slowly, as days blended into routine, they began spending time together outside the range. It wasn't dramatic. There were no slow-motion kisses under rain, no epic declarations, just Ethan, bringing Harper coffee the way she liked it, black, no sugar. Just Harper helping him patch a tear in his glove instead of suggesting a replacement. It was late evening, sitting in the bed of his truck, eating takeout and watching the horizon dissolve into night without needing to speak. She was still Harper. He was still learning how to be someone, not just seem like someone. Then one day in the quiet of a late October dusk, he turned to her. "I'm not asking because I want to be part of your story," he said. "I'm asking because I want to build something real with someone who doesn't care about the noise." Harper looked up from her rifle case, her fingers pausing mid-wipe. "What are you asking?" He held her gaze. "Stay, not just here with me." Harper's expression didn't shift, but something softened behind her eyes. The kind of softness not born from romance, but from safety. "I don't belong in a spotlight," she said. "Then we stay in the shadows," Ethan replied. They didn't label anything after that. They didn't need to. But the world, relentless as ever, pushed them into the next chapter. A month later, Harper received an official letter from the International Shooting Federation. She'd been nominated for Shooter of the Year alongside Olympic gold medalists and international champions. Her nomination sparked global debate, not for lack of skill, but because she had never entered a single sanctioned competition outside the United States. Some called her a folk hero. Others called her a myth in jeans and grit. Harper didn't campaign, but her name swept the vote at the awards ceremony in Geneva. She was the only finalist who arrived without an entourage. She wore a plain black dress that looked like it belonged in a church pew, not under flashing lights. Her hair was still braided, the same way her father taught her, tight out of the way, focused. When they called her name, the standing ovation lasted nearly 2 full minutes. Harper walked to the podium slowly, calm, unshaken. She stared at the trophy for a long beat before speaking. "I was taught that a bullet is not a threat," she said, her voice steady. "It's a commitment. You aim only if you're willing to carry the responsibility of where it lands." She paused, letting the words settle. "This award doesn't belong to me. It belongs to every girl who walked into a room and was laughed out of it. Every kid told they didn't belong. Every shooter who was measured by what they wore instead of how they aimed." Another pause. "My father used to say, they don't have to see you coming. Just make sure they feel it when you leave." She looked at the crowd, her gaze cutting through velvet tuxedos and diamond pins. They felt it. Then she walked off stage. She didn't stay for press, didn't sign autographs. She flew home that night on a coach ticket, sitting next to a sleeping toddler and a woman knitting a scarf. And when she arrived back in her town, back in the pine trees and gravel roads, Ethan was there waiting at the terminal. He didn't say anything, just opened his arms, and she walked into them. Not as a symbol, not as a legend, but as herself, Harper Lane. The girl who spoke only when she had to. The woman who made every word, every breath, every shot count. 1 year after Harper Lane's record-setting day at Hawthorne, the range looked different. Not in its walls or its polished marble floors. Those still gleamed under LED lights, but in something deeper. The air no longer carried the acidic weight of judgment. The eyes that once mocked now studied. The hands that once pointed now took notes. And in the middle of it all, Harper stood quietly, just as she always had, with her father's rifle slung across her shoulder and her braid tucked neatly down her back. The plaque remained mounted on the east wall of the Range's Hall of Fame just beneath the spotlight. It read, Harper Lane 100-0. One whole grouping record, holder be the bullet that sings. Beneath the plaque was a glass case holding the very M1 Garand she used on that day. Harper hadn't wanted to part with it, but she knew it belonged there not for display, but for defiance, as a symbol, a reminder that perfection didn't require polish. That legacy didn't need a designer grip. She had a new rifle now. Still iron sights, still no frills, just steel, walnut, and breath. And she used it every day, not to chase new records, but to train others to find their own aim, because that was the real change Hawthorne had asked Harper to return as a coach, not for prestige or PR, but because no one could deny the shift she had caused. And when she returned, she did so on her terms. No uniform, no lectures. Just 10 lanes, 10 students at a time, and silence unless the lesson truly needed words. Word of her program spread fast. At first, it was a trickle, a few newcomers unsure of themselves. Then came the veterans, then the forgotten. Those passed over because they didn't look the part. A girl with a stutter who shot tighter groups than any prodigy. A boy with a prosthetic hand who learned to fire with the strength of his shoulder. A retired truck driver who brought his grandfather's rifle and walked away with the cleanest 95 in the room. They came not because Harper promised glory, they came because she proved it was possible, and they stayed because she never once raised her voice. Pressure is loud, she said one day to a room of first-timers. Precision is quiet. Those words found their way onto walls, onto t-shirts she didn't authorize, onto comment sections of motivational posts, but she didn't mind, as long as the meaning stayed true. Meanwhile, Ethan Caldwell stayed close, not in the center of attention where he used to live, but just behind the line, watching learning growing. His relationship with Harper had blossomed slowly, like something neither of them wanted to label too early, afraid it might wilt under scrutiny. But love, real love, didn't need a spotlight. It just needed truth. Ethan trained daily. Not to beat her, he'd long given up that foolish pursuit, but to walk beside her. He didn't try to become her equal. He tried to become worthy of the steadiness in her eyes, and she, in her own way, allowed him closer each time he showed up without ego. They spent weekends exploring the countryside, scouting old ranges, fixing up rusted targets, and rebuilding what others had left behind. On one of those weekends, Harper led him to a forgotten hilltop with broken benches and weeds taller than a child. She didn't say what the place was at first, just stood in silence for a while. Then my dad taught me to shoot here before the army, before everything. Ethan knelt and ran his hand over a cracked wooden post. It's still standing, he said. Harper nodded barely. But still, that night under the stars, Ethan pulled out a small box, simple wood, no shine. I don't want to put you in a frame, he said, echoing the letter her father once wrote. I just want to walk with you. No spotlight, no noise, she didn't cry. She smiled. Small, sure, and warm. Then let's walk, she said. They married 6 months later. Quietly, no press. Just a field, 2 chairs, her mother in the front row with a soft blanket and a handkerchief. She never used. The vows were handwritten, the rings plain silver. Her bouquet was made of brass casings wrapped in ribbon. His boutonniere was a single sunflower. Her favorite after the ceremony, Harper went back to the range the very next morning. Ethan came too. The students never even asked where she'd been, because nothing had changed except everything had. The culture at Hawthorne shifted like tectonic plates. Slowly but irrevocably, the elite still came, but with humbler steps. They now lined up next to community college kids beside mothers of 2 next to 20-year-olds whose only gear was heart. There were still those who scoffed, always would be, but they no longer lasted long. The scoreboard was no longer the only truth. The whispers held less venom. The silence between shots felt less suffocating, more sacred. And Harper became something more than a record holder, more than a coach, more than a myth. She became a measure. Other ranges called their best. Harper-level commentators used her name as a verb. She harpered that 10, someone might say, and everyone would understand. It wasn't just about precision. It was about poise, about showing up without announcement and leaving with respect, whether it was given or not. One afternoon, as Harper closed up her training bay, a girl no older than 10 ran up breathless. "Miss Lane," she shouted, waving a printout. "I did it. I got my first 8. It's not a 10 yet, but I breathed slow." Like you said, Harper crouched, took the paper, studied the tightness of the shots. "You're not chasing my score," she said gently. "You're building your own." The girl nodded solemnly. "Next time," she whispered, "I'll Harper it." Harper smiled, not out of pride, but out of recognition, because that spark in the girl's eyes was familiar. It was the same one she saw in her reflection years ago, on a day when a rifle felt too heavy and the world too loud. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden lines across the floor, Harper turned off the lights of Lane 8 for the last time that day. Not because the story had ended, but because it had become something more. A legend not locked in history, but passed lane to lane, breath to breath. And it began always the same way, with silence, with stillness, with one bullet that sang.